So we've had some basic conversation. There's been a bit of a back and forth email proposing, who the actors might be to speak at the webinar. And I guess the idea, Catherine, was just to concretize that and agree on how do we organize an exciting webinar that reflects some of the really exciting work that's happening and some of the progress and that's happening. So I think that's from me.
Why don't we just jump in and go through the list of examples that we had. So I think one example that I think would be Haiti. I think the work that the congregation, that CRS and Changing the Way We Care, sorry, I'm a bit tired, it's a long week. CRS and Changing the Way We Care has done in Haiti with Alta Visita and the Congregation of Sister to transition their whole model of care from residential care to community and family care, and really the focus on supporting families with children with disability. I think that is a fantastic angle. So I love how Florence just has this little thing hanging like she's a ghost. I love it.
It's like a dancing, what is it? A dancing
It's an
scarf or
apparition.
I don't know. I love it. I just love it. I'm mesmerized by it. I can't continue talking. Florence, we all need to know, when you leave, there's this floating thing that replaces you like a little ghost. What is behind you? Oh, you're on mute.
It's actually a very unused exercise bag. A COVID exercise bag.
I love it. I could show you. I have my bike, my pedals just underneath my thing where I just hang out my feet on basically now. Anyway, exactly. So I think that was one idea. I had thought of Burkina Faso, but I think from the recent exchange today might still be early day, although be interesting. I think it depends what we want to highlight. I don't think we want to highlight a specific case study all done and ready. I mean, if we have that, like we have for Haiti, I think that would be fantastic. And we have a short video as well for Haiti, which I think you're all familiar. It's on BCN as well. So I think that would be a nice way of presenting that work. Burkina, what I thought was interesting is how these different faith-based actors, and again, I always forget if they're Catholic per se or not, so apologies on that one, but definitely faith-based, Christian faith-based. And what's nice is that we're using one model, one pastor, so Christian, not Catholic, I think, who has kind of been further ahead on that pathway of transitioning to influence and share with others who are maybe earlier on the pathway. So I thought that might be interesting. But Eileen, I hear you that it might be too soon. So just something to think about. Then I think Uganda was maybe a potential, but we need to get further information from Barbara. I don't know, Eileen, if you have any thoughts on Uganda. I think we've all been running at 1,000 miles an hour. So, and of course, I'll let Kelly talk about Mexico and all that. Go ahead, Eileen, sorry.
Yeah, Uganda, I like what Kelly actually wrote in the chat as a consideration for Uganda, which is the CCCI work, and specifically hearing from the sisters, but that obviously is not, we're only sort of tangentially working with them.
I'm not sure Aru has a really good example of transitioning, to be honest, because that's something we're developing a potential concept to support them on that pathway. So, but yeah, Eileen, maybe I'm missing something.
Right. I mean, they, like others, are on the path. I mean, that's the same situation in Burkina Faso. I mean, they're sort of on the journey and at different stages of the journey, but none has really fully transitioned yet. I mean, there are examples. I mean, we were just on that call, Kelly, with Chris from SIF, and he has a number of case studies and examples from Uganda that he's been talking about, of course, in Tororo and others that they're embarking on the journey with. But in terms of CRS affiliated, I don't think we necessarily have anything to put forth. Go ahead, Kelly.
Sorry, just to tag on to that. It was in our conversation with our transition working group with the collaborative this morning, Chris did specifically mention work with a Kampala-based Catholic institution for older youth, it sounded like, that had transitioned. It's the first I've heard of it, and I don't know what documentation is around it, but he was very keen and excited, I think, to talk about it. But I think, yeah, I think explore a little bit more just where they are in the process and how, if at all, I don't know if it was run by a priest or by a sisters or brother, I don't know. So I think that is a big question mark, but he was kind of excited to share. Thanks.
Is that Aru?
He didn't say, no, it's Child's Eye Foundation.
Yeah.
And so I don't know who he didn't mention Aru. And so that's where I thought.
And that's why, yeah, I don't think Aru will be a good example because Barbara has just met with them. And I think they haven't even thought through that process. So they're not even like Burkina Faso, I think, is thinking through, but still early on and getting on that process. I think Aru right now is mainly focused on reintegrating children and has not kind of put any plans or thoughts of how their model could transition per se. But I think Child Eye would be great.
It'd be good to be clear that that's a Catholic.
That's what I would just say, Florence, is that I think maybe Beck could put, you or Beck could follow up and really ask some questions and get some documentation, because it is the first time I've heard of it, but he was very articulate and excited to share. So
that sounds good. So we can definitely follow up on that.
I was going to say, in the one in Tororo, I thought that was Catholic. Do you know, Kelly?
Right. He did say something about that, but I no.
But then he also mentioned Salvation
Army.
Okay.
Army.
Okay. Never mind.
Yeah.
In terms of Zambia, because I know Zambia has been mentioned previously, and sorry if you spoke about it when I was running to the door.
You weren't. The ghost was not purview to that information. So again, I think I'm waiting to hear back from Barbara. So I've reached out to Barbara to find out about Uganda, because I think she would have a very good sense of what's happening in Uganda as well Zambia, more or less. But we could definitely, through our CRS work there, again, I am not 100% sure they're yet on the journey of transitioning. I think a lot of the focus that they have done is reintegration. Mm-hmm. So again, very similar to Aru, I think. That's my gut feeling, but I might be wrong. But let me, as soon as I hear back from Barbara, we'll get back to you.
It's a good question. Are we only looking at transitioning? I mean, I think we're looking, clearly we want some examples so we can see that, things are being put into action in terms of the transformation. But I think we could also have examples where the work around moving children out, the work around even convincing at the advocacy level, getting statement and agreement. I mean, I think and I'm thinking of that particularly in relation to, and I never remember CCCI and the work. So I mean, I think it'd be nice to have different examples. The reason I'm thinking of Zambia, just because I've seen GHR, I've seen some of the documentation clearly. I've seen GHR talking a lot about the work of the Catholic sisters there, but I'm not really privy to much more than what's. Yes, that's right. Philip. It's Dan, and there's been a number of policy brief, or not policy, but like case study briefs that have been done. But I'm just wondering if it might be worth having it as an example. Again, I don't know enough about the details about it, but it'd be great if we could. Yes.
I'll get back to you. CRS is the one coordinating and documenting all the lessons learned in Zambia. So as soon as I get further information, I can share.
That would be really great. And Mexico?
I guess before we move to Mexico, can we just finish with, so would we think that we would have Sister Naluka provide kind of the global perspective, especially the focused on right now, I think it's Uganda, Zambia, and Kenya, with the idea that I believe they're going to start also in Malawi and Sri Lanka as well, with GHR doing the Catholic Care for Children International. So if she painted the global picture and then potentially have one or two sisters from those countries presenting an example, on the ground example, and then move to something else like the Good Shepherd Sisters in Mexico. Is that how we would maybe want to frame it, to have both Sister Naluka present something globally and then giving some concrete examples from the sisters themselves?
I like that.
I was going to say Haiti too. I think that Haiti example sounds great. I'm just already thinking though about language and translation. But that's
we would provide it.
French and Spanish.
Yeah. Okay. As long as we can make sure to secure, but we should be able to. So time frame is the only thing to make sure we've got people available. But yeah, we would provide it. We've been aching to provide some French interpretation actually.
So I have just a couple of thoughts, just considerations, I guess. I love that idea of Sister Naluka. I think, we of course need to have her here and agree to that. I do worry that could be its own webinar in and of itself, especially if you bring in two representatives from one of the countries they work in. So just a little bit thinking about time. And I'm wondering if it's valuable in having a diverse range of Catholic actors who are doing this. So we have sisters. The Haiti, is that like a Catholic? Is it also sisters, Sev?
It's also sisters. Yeah.
Also sisters. So the other thing to consider then, find out about Uganda, who that is. But also you had suggested, Mary Beth, in another email, I think, Nuestros Pequeños Hermanos, which is a Catholic organization, but not run by sisters. And BEP was on the call this morning, the same one that Chris was on, and mentioned that they are in a transition process with the 9 facilities in Latin America at very different stages, depending on the country. But that she's actually headed to Bolivia, which I believe is the furthest along, but that could be an interesting one, just because it's not a sister group. And, I don't know, just a thought though. And I think we've got some great options. It's about how to make it so it's not 4 hours long instead of an hour and a half, and we get the real nuggets from each of them.
I do think that like Nuestros Pequeños Hermanos would have a very different perspective to add. And since it's lay-led, I think instead of sisters or brothers or priests, I think that we would hear a very different experience that would be really valuable. Erica also brought up the idea, which I think I'm still leaning towards Nuestros Pequeños Hermanos and PH more than this, but also we've been working with a couple of organizations that are working in Honduras and are very, very early in their stages of transition and reintegration even. So I thought I would bring that to the table. I think more Amigos de Jesus, other than the other one, Finca del Nino, that she brought up. But I think if we could get NPH, I think that given that they're working in 9 countries, they have their one family program that is part of their website, and that they have a lot of US connections. I think it could be a really exciting way to bring them in more formally into some more of the conversations. So at least with Changing the Way We Care. I know maybe they're more involved with now with the collaborative, but I think it could be helpful.
So just in terms of using the time that we have, I mean, I think there's a lot of richness there. And I do think you can have, you know, in the past, we've had like 4 presenters. We could stretch it a bit more, but of course, more presenters, less time for discussion or question and answers, which is always a bit of a challenge. But I think, I mean, I really like the idea of mixing the sense of the global with the country example, even though it means that you have limitation. But the thing is that a lot of the audience may not be aware at all about what's happening in relation to the movement in the Catholic community, and I think that's it doesn't preclude doing a further webinar where we kind of dig down on, for example, some of the transitioning. But I think it'd be good to have a first webinar that kind of even just enable the audience to understand the breadth of what's happening, and have some country example to show, what does it look like in practice, as well as at the policy or the advocacy level. So if we had, I mean, practically speaking, if we had the global picture by Sister Neluka, and then 3 countries example, and I like the idea of having diverse types of Catholic representative, but again, you're better placed to make that judgment in terms of where the work is happening, where the examples, how powerful the examples are. But it'd be great to have, just at the very basic level, clearly having an African example, a Latin American example, and Haiti would be a fantastic example as well. That sounds great to me. As somebody who doesn't know very much about the work that's happening by these organizations, so like just purely.
May I just throw something to consider into this discussion? So the transition group is also, for the collaborative, is also preparing a webinar around transition.
Yeah.
For March, right, Florence?
Yeah,
Sorry,
right,
I have so many webinars in my head.
Yeah.
There was discussion about including Hermana Celia from Mexico in that one.
Yeah.
So I just want to put it out there, because what I have, we've got 3 groups from Latin America, Haiti, Mexico, and if we do Nuestros Pequeños Hermanos. If we want, maybe we keep Hermana Celia in the March webinar, and that would free up some space in this one. And we could invite her as a participant. So, if there are questions about experiences, et cetera, she might be able to respond in the chat or something. But I'm just thinking if that makes it easier for decision making.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. I mean, the transitioning webinar is really going to look very specifically at that, and it's going to look at the work around the tools and so on, as you know. So, I mean, I think it's going to be much more focused, and the audience is likely to be the audience that's particularly interested in this one. That's also why it's important to have that sense of system level change in there, in terms of as well among the Catholic institutions and policymakers and so on, because it shows that it's not just some actors are actually doing it, individual actors are doing it, but that there is actually a lot of institutional buy-in. There is, at different levels, but there is progress in that sense. So I think that I mean, it sounds like a good idea not to, to kind of, if we have also that these different choices, to balance out so that we have different actors in different webinars. But it'd be good to have some. This is going to be for the broader audience. So, and we want to bring in as big an audience as possible on that one. So we need to do a lot of really good work to outreach, because again, we want to put it out there. I mean, there is an advocacy element to these webinars as well as information exchange, isn't it? We want to put it out there that there is a lot of work happening among those actors. I'm not sure how much visibility that is having to the broader care, reform community. So it is giving it that visibility, and also enabling others to think of how that might relate to the work that they're doing, and But clearly, you're better placed in terms of thinking what does that look like. So I get it from the discussion. I think there's a sense that it makes sense to start with Sister Neluka and the global picture, yeah. And then I see there's a chat. Sorry, I'm just catching up on the chat. Philip.
Yeah, I think what Philip's suggesting is, why don't you go and explain it, Philip?
Oh, either of us could. I'll just jump. This Vatican document, maybe the moderator doesn't have to be a presenter, can kind of talk a bit about it. One thing that worked very well in my talk to the dicastery in December was going through the history of the church and its involvement with orphanages and children's homes, which goes back centuries, and it really was the Catholic Church that started this off. So if whoever was moderating wanted some of that information, I could share that presentation, and they can pull some of the, they could wrap that in, because it runs deep. It really runs deep. There's also a bit in that document that I attached about the theology, and that's really important to Catholic actors to hear about. So it's not heavy duty theology, but there's, in their words, why they think that they're called to act on the issues related to children and COVID, and including family strengthening and the like. So pulling some of that in, I think, could be helpful. It's just an intro.
I think that sounds great. I wouldn't spend too much. I mean, I would recognize that the audience is going to have a mixed audience, including a lot of secular actors. So I think I like the idea of showing from the church itself, its history and its involvement. And so I think that's really powerful. But just also maybe not going too much into the detail of the theology.
I'm wondering if it might make sense to have it as a closure rather than an entry. I just worry that we might lose a lot of people if we start with that. I don't know. I'm maybe overly sensitive on these topics. But just a thought.
The document, Sev, I wouldn't necessarily lead with a document, but I do think briefly, just retracing a little bit about, if I'm speaking very frankly, like the church got us into this mess where we have like this problem of institutional care, not presenting it that way, but really framing it that the church is, very committed to caring for kids and has demonstrated this over centuries and centuries. But now look at what's, the movement has shifted, and look how the church is now transitioning to be a leader, or hopefully working towards that, towards family-based care and living values. But yeah, I don't know if you think starting that way would lose people, but what do you think, Sev? Do you think?
But I'm, how I am, I get very nervous. Yeah. So I'm just wondering of like really putting it, so if CCI opens up and about the amazing work that they're doing, then we go into really concrete examples of how this is happening in different pathway. And then we bring it all together of how this is a momentous moment, and, all these examples can really further inform and influence the broader church that we know in the past has always been extremely dedicated for children, but often by supporting residential care solutions. And now with all this energy and examples, we can really increase the movement towards family care and community care or something like that. I don't know. I mean, you could do it both ways. I'll leave it to all of you to decide if we start with it or end with it.
I think it depends on audience. If the audience is going to be Catholic organizations that are being exposed to this, I think starting with a little bit of the history and the theology will be really important for them, because I get those questions all the time. If it's more of a informing a mixed or secular audience about how this advocacy was pulled together with an important faith tradition, then I agree that we could start with maybe not putting it up front, but having some of the helpful quotes from Pope Francis and whatever out there, just to show that there's kind of a backdrop there, a green light. And then CCCI is very systemic because they're working globally. So that's a great start, because they're not just a project here or there. They have a global mission with 800 to 1,000 Mother Superiors who are already kind of mobilizing on it. And Sister Naluka does a good job of presenting that, in my experience.
And the audience is likely to be mixed. We definitely want the audience to be mixed, because that's also part of the aim, isn't it? Is to really bring this work to an audience that may not be connecting or may not know, that coming from different tradition or coming from completely different. So we don't know yet, but we will generally, the audience is a mixed audience. So that's what we would aim for. We want them to be excited about this. We want an audience that doesn't necessarily get exposed about that go, oh, really? This is happening?
I can also, though, imagine, Florence, I'm thinking about Guatemala. We're working with a group of about 10 Catholic residential care facilities and sort of under the auspices of the Monsignor. And I'm sort of envisioning a viewing party or something. So, because I really think it could be inspirational. So I think, for those of us, I think we can kind of think of some creative ideas of how to disseminate this and encourage our colleagues at country level to think of ways.
I think that would be fantastic. That would be really fantastic.
If it's of interest, we can also include a question in the registration form where we get a little bit of information on an affiliation of the participants with a Catholic institution.
We have to be a bit careful on how we do this to gather that information. But it's a possibility. But I think the point is that the webinar, we can see as well how it gets disseminated. So I really do think we need to think about that as well in how we set it up, because then the webinar can be used as well, both encouraging people to attend the webinar, but also using the webinar. So I see from that perspective the value in making sure that key points are addressed at the beginning of it, so that it resonates with that audience when, whatever way they access the webinar. So I guess, I think we've got a picture of this, or it's starting to take form, but a couple of things. One, just getting that clarity around the country example. Yeah, that's exactly what I was coming to. Sev reads my mind all the time. So do we need more information to, it sounds as if we might need a few more conversations to confirm the examples, yeah?
And I think too, someone, I guess, there needs to be a reach out to CCCI. I think so, just sort of in terms of next steps, who's going to do that. And
absolutely. And it's not going to be me, let me tell you straight away.
Yeah, we can reach out to CCCI. That's not a problem. I think I just want to be very clear about what the ask of the opportunity is and any specifics we can provide. Because I imagine for Sister Naluka especially, that would be important for her to know up front. But sure, we can reach out.
So I guess what we discussed in terms of opening presentation and the scope of it, the elements that that have been identified. But actually that leads to the second question that I have is around the facilitator, the moderator, because that's often what the moderator then ends up doing is doing things like talking to the speaker. I mean, we're involved in supporting this, but it's really, really important. And I think for that, having someone who has deep knowledge of the Catholic, and I'm looking at a couple of you, but I'm looking at you, Mary Beth, in particular, is that I think we need, the moderator needs to also play a key role in terms of those conversations once we've identified, in terms of having the discussion with the speakers, unpacking what we think we really need out of them, what their questions are, and so on.
Beth, what about you? I'm going to put you on the spot, just given
Sure.
your role changing the way we care, and you really know the church pretty well.
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to moderate and
That'd
to
be
organize.
fabulous. That's really great. And so, again, like in terms of the shaping of that webinar, that's going to be important to have your thoughts, Mary Beth, in discussion, with the sister, but also with all the actors here in terms of, it sounds as if we've got two main areas, the global piece that's going to be, and framing, including the link to the work with the Vatican, which I understand, if I'm right, Philip, in what you said, Sister Naluka can do as well? Or do we need someone?
No,
No.
I think I could probably just prep Mary Beth to do it.
Okay.
And I think it's mainly drawing off of, I sent a link to the page, and that was the event that they held in December. The main thing there is the dicastery has made this statement after a lot of work. And then CCCI is kind of working in that world of sisters, but globally. Okay,
great. So there would be a framing piece from the moderator that introduces the webinar, can introduce some of this and to frame it. Then moving on to Sister Naluka to talk about CCCI's work. And then we go into the 3 country examples.
And I think the 3 country examples are TBD.
TBD, but
I think I would say Haiti, I feel like that sounds like a wonderful example because it's a complete transition.
Yeah.
I think others are at different steps of the process.
So Haiti, I keep going back to Zambia just because that's the one that I've seen some big advocacy around, but it may not be Zambia. I don't know the details of it, but Zambia, Uganda.
Let me get back to you on Zambia and Uganda as soon as I'll ping Barbara first thing in the morning. And I'm wondering, I feel like Mexico, I know, Kelly, that Mexico and Haiti in the same, more or less, region, but they're so different,
Yeah. And I think that, there are a couple of angles we could ask the sisters to focus on. And it could be sort of, based on the case study that we just did, kind of that emotional, almost grieving process, which is kind of interesting. Or there are 2 that could give concrete examples of transitioning, one into a temporary shelter for migrant mothers and young children, or the other a centro comunitario. So, it just depends sort of, and that's where I think working together and putting this concept note together and seeing which examples kind of highlight so that we have the whole transition process kind of filled in. So, and it wouldn't have to necessarily be Hermana Celia. If we decided to go with either Tijuana or Ciudad Juarez, it could be one of the lead sisters from those 2 options. Anyway, I'm thinking out loud, sorry, but
I guess Sorry, I was going to say, I guess part of the decision and the thinking on this is who's really, good advocate, good speaker is helpful, because often you can have somebody who's really brilliant, but might not be so good in articulating or so think of as well in those terms of who would be presenting from these key actors.
I love the migration. Of course, I'm biased, but I do think that, because I think, if we're presenting Haiti, which is really community and the disability angle, et cetera, and really finding solution with the community, and then we provide an example around migration, it really highlights how there's just so many options depending on the context you work with and the solutions that the population you're serving. So I think that one sounds really exciting, if that would be a good match.
Yeah,
Or
I think so.
yeah.
I mean, I think it's, I'm looking at Mary Beth on my screen, just thinking Hermana Celia, who's kind of the leader, is really the most articulate, I think, and is sort of our champion. But Hermana Cecilia is the one who does that. So anyway, we'll just think internally about who might be, I think, the most exciting presenter. But I think that's a great example. And they're still in the process. They are providing services, but interestingly, I think is really capturing that, yes, they made the programmatic transition, but the emotional one sort of, I think, was left behind, but came up and they're still dealing with it, which I think is a really interesting aspect.
Yeah.
I think the one good thing too with the Mexican sister examples is they're part of the congregation of the Sisters of the Good Shepherd. And so that's a global congregation, and the whole congregation has committed to family care. The different countries are taking different, steps and different processes and timelines, but the whole congregation is committed, which is really exciting, because there's very few that I think have actually had that as a global commitment of all their sisters. So I guess I am a little concerned though, that I think everything that, if we pick these three examples of one of the CCCI countries in Africa, Mexico and Haiti, those are all religious sisters. So are we thinking that those are what we should go with? And should we frame this as Catholic globally? Or I'm wondering, I don't want to force something that's just to try to get a different voice in there, but I do feel like right now with what we're proposing, at least what I'm hearing, is all sisters.
Is the Uganda example from Child's Eye also sisters?
We don't know. I think we need more information, and Nuestro Pequeños Hermanos is not. So those two, I think, could be options. And just getting back to you, Mary Beth, I think Nuestros Pequeños Hermanos is probably better than the Finca.
Amigos de Jesus.
I think so. I think they're just not.
I don't feel like they're far enough along, and especially in articulating where they're at. So I think the Mexican sisters are much farther along in articulating it. So
Sounds
so
good.
do we think bringing NPH in? I mean, I feel like that's probably too much to have an African, Mexico, Haiti, and Nuestros Pequeños Hermanos in addition to Sister Naluka. That just seems like a lot.
Where is NPH? Sorry, I'm lost here.
They're in 9 countries in Latin America, throughout Central and South America. And they also have a robust program that is based out of Chicago in the US. But it's not all on family care. Like they've been an orphanage sending, a lot of Catholic volunteers go through them. But they started having a one family program, and they're rolling it out in different of the 9 countries that they work in. So, but they reached out to us.
Yeah, I remember I looked into that. They still do quite a bit of residential care, don't they?
Yes, yeah, exactly. So I think that like they're a unique thing, that they've somewhat drank the Kool-Aid, that I think that they believe in family care, but they have not fully bought in. So, but I think that that's actually really true of where the Catholic Church is at as a whole. I mean, I think that there is growing belief in family care and growing ways of how you do that. But I think that they're very representative of really where the US Catholic Church particularly is at in supporting residential care. So
that's an interesting question that I hadn't thought about the US Catholic versus other, and I hadn't taken that into consideration. with the example that we've chosen, are they all US Catholic affiliated? If that makes sense. I don't even know whether that makes sense as a question. Meaning that or are they also Catholic affiliation from other countries or supported by Catholic organization from other countries? I can't hear
Sorry,
you,
Florence,
Kelly.
I didn't catch that. Can
No,
you-
it's just that it's just because Maribeth was mentioning that these are all US Catholic. Did you say that or did I misunderstand that?
No, I don't think so.
Oh,
You
okay,
mean-
I misunderstood then.
No.
Yeah,
I thought-
NPH is the only one that has a part of the organization is US based. They
Oh,
have
I
an
see.
NPH International, which works in the 9 countries, and then they have NPH USA that is more of their donor supporter side of things, helping
Yeah.
support the work that they're doing in the 9 countries. So they have a one family program in their NPH International that they are sharing with donors in the US primarily. They're really featuring that and trying to get more people involved in supporting the family-based care stuff.
Okay, I get it.
So
So, but we're talking about more rather than narrowing. So we talked about, 4 being a good number as a rule of thumb in terms of also enabling space for questions and.
So I wonder, sorry, just to summarize, Florence, I think sort of next steps. What I'm hearing is we need to speak with Sister Niluka, Mary Beth, and that she would give the overview, and perhaps let's leave it to her to suggest one member of Zambia, Uganda, or Kenya, right? That could do I think that would be a nice East Africa. And then Haiti, I think, do we all agree on Haiti? Yes.
Yeah.
And then I think that what we would look at is potentially Mexico, the Ciudad Juarez in particular. And then I guess with Nuestros Pequeños Hermanos, I guess, Mary Beth, and you know them best out of all of us, I think. I would just feel a little bit more comfortable if we dug a little bit deeper and found out exactly, and maybe had someone from that organization present from the specific country program that really is transitioning, because I do worry, and to make it really clear that they need to be transparent, that their organization is still in the process. But I feel like that would be 4 then, right? Is that, and I think that's good. If it's an hour and a half.
So global 3 countries.
Global and 4 countries.
Global's 4
Fine.
countries.
Well, because Sister Niluka would
Haiti.
have one of the sisters that's engaged in CCCI in Zambia, Uganda, or Kenya, kind of not co-present, but like sub-present,
Okay, I get it.
after
Yeah.
her. And then you've got Haiti, Mexico, Nuestros Pequeños Hermanos. And it is a mix of kind of Catholic lay and sisters, right? Mary Beth, yeah?
NPH, I think, is primarily, I don't think it is very sister run at all.
Exactly.
I
So
think it's
there,
very
yeah.
lay run. Mhm.
But I do think, Mary Beth, if we can commit to maybe, I just feel like we need to get a little more information just to be sure.
Totally agree. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Does that sound okay to people? Yes?
It does.
Okay.
In terms of the discussion around bringing in that Vatican statement at the beginning or towards the end, that from what we discussed, Mary Beth, you would kind of play that role. Are we still thinking that's a kind of framing at the beginning, or more a picking it up towards the end?
I think it's a great way to end. Like, I think if we have a very brief, not go into the depth about the history of the church's involvement with residential care, I think we have a very quick beginning, go into Sister Niluka, do the country examples after she speaks. And then looking forward, I think we look at the global church, the global Catholic Church has committed to family care and even produced, related to COVID, a statement that says this. And that's a huge step, even though they didn't say we're ending all residential care facilities immediately, like they at least are putting it down in writing that they believe that children should grow up in families, especially children that are losing caregivers to COVID. So
that sounds totally great. So we've got a bit of a plan. We've got Mary Beth as our moderator, which is fabulous. The other thing as well, just to remember, is that we do like to also enable people to access resources. So any resources, documentation, and all that, let's make sure that once we've agreed on and it, it's primarily on people who present, but if there are other key pieces that actually are relevant, often we do and Catherine, you can speak more about this, but we do an email to all of the participants that, provide some resources, access links to resources, and also contact point for further if there are questions or interest. Yeah, so.
And Florence, do we have a date? Did I miss that somewhere?
Not yet, no. Oh, Catherine is looking as if she has a date.
Well, no, we need to talk about that. So we have something already for March coming up. I think we'll probably have another webinar in April, but I think there will be some months this spring when we have 2 in 1 month. And so I think from April onward, we could be looking at possibilities. It usually, we try to avoid Mondays and Fridays. So I don't know, I mean, if it might make sense to come up with a few options based on how much time we think it would take to pull things together and confirm speakers. And then in your outreach to Sister Naluka, it seems like that's kind of the most important speaker to confirm, but maybe I'm perceiving that wrong. Sorry, Kelly, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to throw some thoughts. I think just having worked with Sister Naluka and some of the other sisters, I think planning a little bit far out and recognizing that they move maybe at a different pace than some of us. So I would say maybe April, May. And I'm kind of getting myself excited. I kind of love the idea of viewing parties, and hopefully COVID would be at a stage where we could, CRS country offices or, others. I could almost envision kind of putting something together to kind of encourage that and invite people to a place together and then have some guiding discussion questions or something afterwards. But I think that if we allow ourselves a little more time, maybe there will be the possibility. I just think like Burkina Faso or, just think about some ideas of a viewing party. So anyway.
But when we say a bit further, we're talking about April, yeah?
I mean, I almost think, I would say April or May, just recognizing, Florence, that Sister Naluka, as wonderful as she is, it sometimes takes weeks to get an email response. So
yeah. And Easter is April 17th. So with Holy Week,
after
that. Yeah. So I think May sounds really good.
Okay, so that's good. And then just because we're also juggling a whole bunch of other webinars, just like having some agreement and then sticking to that early on is a good idea, because otherwise we're going to end up with shifting agendas and that's going to complicate things. But that sounds good. And we can start also working on making sure we've got so.
I need to run for another meeting that's just starting, but I just wanted to let you know for Haiti, it might not be the sisters per se, but the country program who supported the sisters. And is that okay?
Yeah, okay. I think like Frederique might be really
That's what I was
good.
thinking. She's amazing. Yeah.
And I think we should talk, or maybe just exchange by email, but just how much time we think we should allow for Q&A and engagement beyond the presentations.
I think, Mary Beth, I think like putting together a concept note, and I know Catherine and Florence have done this a million times, but just to have that template, and I'm happy to bounce ideas off with you, having moderated a few of these. But yes, exactly. And thinking through how much time.
Definitely. And we've got a brilliant team to help support that. So it should be all good. should all be done good. That sounds exciting. Very excited about this. So we're talking about May, and yes, we'll continue by email the conversation and then jump on a call if we need to.
Yeah, I think we'll probably need one or two more calls. We don't have to have such a big group, but just at least with you, Mary Beth, to talk about pieces of it. So
Yeah, definitely. And Erica will be involved. She just couldn't make it today, but she'll definitely. So, great.
Sounds
Awesome.
great.
Well,
Thank you so
wonderful.
much, all.